Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. This is your girl Yarrii from Yarrii's Take the Podcast, where I keep everything raw, uncut, and educational. In this podcast, I hope to reach out to people who are ready to wake up and heal from generational trauma. Stick around to learn something new with each and every episode and see the world through my take. Now, if you haven't already, please go follow us on Instagram, Yarrii's Take, in the name. And you can stream my podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube if you haven't already done so. As you may all remember, last semester before the summer, we ended off the season with my brother Musa talking about the miracles of the Quran. This semester, I know I was a little not active during the summer. I apologize. Your girl had a lot to do. But we're back. Season 2, episode 1, we are back. And just like in my slogan, how I say, if you're not ready to heal from generational trauma and wake up, this podcast is not for you. And in this episode, I want to touch a little about that generational trauma because I don't think it's talked about enough. Now, let's get into it, right? Over the summer, I stayed home with my parents. I love my family. I love my siblings. I love my cats. But when you stay home, you tend to fall back into tendencies that you used to do before you moved away for college, and you start to backtrack and realize you're picking up bad traits that you already worked on, and now you're coming back to college and you got to work on it again. And it made me realize some things about generational trauma, right? Because it all starts at home, right? And I have a happy, loving family. My parents are amazing parents, but that doesn't mean it can't exist. And before I get into talking about my take on it, because at the end of the day, who cares about my opinion, right? That's not what you're here for. We're here to spread awareness and talk about the facts. So let's talk about facts. I read 2 articles, which I will be linking in the bio, so y'all can go correct me if I'm wrong, because I know I'm not. But in one of the articles, it's called Generational Trauma, Breaking the Cycle of Adverse Childhood Experiences, and this is by Indiana University Health. It talks about how the psychiatrist Robert Andrew Chambers, he discusses what you experience in childhood and how you grow up interferes majorly with your childhood, right? And I've said this multiple times before in my other episodes when we talk about mental health. How you grow up as a developing child and having that developing brain, it has a major impact of your personality and your character of you as an adult. And the adverse childhood experience, it's basically the toxic stress that abuse, trauma, and neglect that creates in a child's brain. And these can be linked to several physical and mental health issues. It's not all just in your head. It can cause drug and alcohol abuse, obesity, mental health, suicidal thoughts, heart issues, cancer, stroke, academic failure, and behavioral problems. And the list kind of just goes on. But just like how through genetical traits, you can receive heart diseases, diabetes, cancers that can be passed down from generation to generation. It's the same thing with generational trauma and depression and mental health as well, because it's also a biological thing. It's literally a genetic trait that can be passed down, and it's crazy of how long that generation can last. And we're going to talk a little about how to break that cycle. But before I get into that, right, I want to talk about what Stanford University said. And the article for that is Major Depression and Genetics, right, by Stanford Medicine. They said that there's a 40 to 50% chance in getting depression genetically, and it has no relation to psychological or physical factors. If you have a depressed family history, a parent or a sibling, there is a 2 to 3 times greater chance of you developing depression, trauma, PTSD, anxiety, all of the whole package. I know, for example, for kids like me, right, being the oldest in a immigrant family, or just being the oldest in any family in general with siblings, I don't think this really applies to only children. I don't know. I don't know what the only child experience is like, but majorly for the children who grew up as the oldest in their family, they always get you're mature for your age, right? Most of the time, it kind of depends on person to person, but I got that a lot around my age, right? And that also just stems to you having to learn to let go of your childhood at an early age, and you had to avoid the negative reactions from parents and and peers and just family members. Because what happened if, as the oldest of the siblings, you acted out? You're being childish. You're asking for attention. Stop acting spoiled, right? And having to take responsibility of your siblings, and sometimes some kids had to parent their family members with kids who come from a family where their parents don't do their parental rights. And, I'm sorry if you had to go through that, but it does happen in a lot of families. You had to neglect and hide your true state because your feelings were invalidated as a child. And this all can be fixed by healing your inner child. And that's where it kind of starts, right? People think that they have to focus on how they're doing mentally at the moment and fix their current mental health problems, but it all starts with your childhood, because everything, even the stuff that you don't consciously remember, because, right, depression suppresses those memories that you don't want to remember. It all starts from your childhood, and if you don't heal that inner child in you, you're never going to be able to overcome these struggles. I just want to be mindful that, right, we do live in a generation of great-great-grandchildren of slaves, of survivors from the Holocaust, and many different tragedies. And you got to understand, those tragedies are literally, can you imagine that, like, the life that we live is literally bliss compared to what they had to go through. And I don't think most of our generation could handle the trauma, the abuse, the torture that most of them had to go through. And imagine the mental health side effects that they had to live through, and that being passed down from generation to generation because nobody stood up and wanted to break that cycle. With some parents, right, this is very controversial when it comes to beating your children, spanking, yelling, shaming. Some people think it works. Some people don't think it works. I think, in my personal opinion, I'm not really going to speak on it, but what I do believe is that at a very early age, right, it's different once they're a teenager, because teenagers can be a lot to deal with, but at a very early age where they're understanding what life is and they're understanding how to walk, how to talk, and how to grasp the idea of life and existence alone, it's very crucial to be gentle and parent very gently with your children. Spanking them, yelling at them, shaming them is not going to improve their behavior when they're acting out to, get attention, or just they're being a child. They're literally just being a child. And you need to start with breaking that cycle. It either starts with the parents or a sibling, somebody who's woke enough to see that there is a cycle going on, and it's not going to stop until somebody speaks up and calls it out. And you gotta, as a parent or as a sibling, for example, with me, right, I realized as I was growing up as the oldest, I picked up some of the traits from my mother with parenting my siblings. And I forgot to remind myself that I'm not their mom, but I'm their sister. I'm their older sister. And I used to treat them like how my mom would treat them. And I come from an immigrant family. We got slippers flying around the house. It was normal for us. And I didn't realize that I had to recognize the triggers that I had attached to growing up as a child that triggered me with the way my mom parented me, and separate how I parented my siblings. And looking at the difference between me and my siblings, mashallah, Allahumma barik, like, they are doing amazing. I'm so proud of them. I could have never been more proud. And I realized, like, I'm not trying to take all the credit because they did most of the hard work as well, but it wouldn't have started if I didn't at some point in time wake up and realize the cycle that was continuing on. And even if I couldn't reverse my parents' cycle, I could do something about my siblings and then make sure that they didn't carry it on to their kids, and their kids carry, how the cycle works, basically. You got to be able to separate your trauma, your own trauma, and not have it reflect or project upon the person in front of you, whether that's your child, whether that's your sibling, a friend, or even somebody you're interacting with. And a lot of people don't realize that they do that. Most of their attitude, behavioral problems, oh, I just have an RBF, oh, I'm just naturally mean. Like, no, girl, you're not. You have issues you didn't work on, and you're projecting them on people who didn't deserve it. Like, you're bleeding on people who didn't cut you. Why? Anyways, breaking that cycle all begins with being able to recognize how it started and being able to acknowledge that you need help. And sometimes you alone can't fix it, right? Using mental health resources I don't know how everybody's health insurance plan works, but if you are covered under Medicaid, most health insurances, they all have a counselor, therapist, psychiatrist option where you can, and it's covered under your health insurance, and you can go use those resources and get professional help. There is no shame in getting professional help. And I understand why some people may be against medication. And I'm not going to argue with you and try to convince you to get medication. That's your body, your choice, right? But a good therapist is not going to try to medicate you right away. They're going to try to isolate the problem and give you healthy coping mechanisms on how to get past those triggers and traumas without relying on medication. Some people's situation are too severe to the point where they need that extra help and push to get them on the right track so they can start doing it without the medication. But like I said, that's your body, your choice. I gotta stop saying I do that a lot, right? And I gotta stop smacking my teeth. Anyways, boundaries, right? Boundaries are really important. And it's not just the boundaries that you set for yourself. You got to teach your kids and your siblings and your friends as well how to teach. You got to teach them to set boundaries for themselves as well, because some people, they don't understand the idea of boundaries. They really don't. And it's really important because it's not disrespect. It's not asking for too much. It's not you being a bad friend, a bad parent. Boundaries teaches respect. It teaches the person in front of you. It teaches you to respect somebody else's space. It teaches you to respect the person in front of you and be able to love them in the way that they need to be loved, not in the way that you want to love them, right? That's one thing that people don't understand as well. A lot of people try to love the person in front of them in their own love language. That's your emotional needs. Nobody can. If somebody was to try to love you in their own love language, you're not going to be fulfilled. You're going to be emotionally numb. You're not going to feel fulfilled with their love. And you got to learn that the person in front of you is different. They have different boundaries. They have different expectations and different ideas of when it comes to love. And your idea of love and their idea of love is not the same. And you got to be able to understand and respect those boundaries if you want a healthy relationship with your mom, your dad, your siblings, your parents. Well, mom and dad are parents, but your kids, even friends. Like, I have a handful of really great friends, and I have a friend that we've been friends for 20 years. I have a friend where we've been friends for 10 years, 1 year, but they all have lasted this long because we were all able to maturely recognize our trauma and triggers and separate that from our friendship and be able to put boundaries in our friendship and love each other for who we are, right? And it didn't happen overnight, like, especially with y'all remember my episode with Melissa? I love her to death, but we had our trial and errors because we had to figure out our triggers and traumas and heal ourselves before we could come back to each other and love each other without trauma bonding, right? That's also another reason why some kids don't know how to speak up to their parents, because in a way they're trauma bonding with their parents and they don't know anything better. They don't know anybody else who's going to love them for who they are, and they accept every type of boundary that's crossed and disrespected from their parents. Yes, they're your parents. Yes, they brought you into this world, but that doesn't mean you're not worthy of respect from them, just how they expect you to respect them. Anyways, as parents especially, right, you have to teach your kids. You can't just force it in their brain, and you can't just scream and yell at them until they learn. You have to teach and model the behavior that you want them to pick up on, that you want them to continue. And if they're seeing you being a bad parent and yelling consistently and handling your issues and your conflicts through anger, through yelling, and through just in a toxic way, you know, they're going to repeat that when they're an adult. And then once they handle their issues with you in that way, you're going to feel disrespected. But whose fault is that? You didn't set a good example. And as parents, it's your job to set the tone and set that example for them and be able to raise them in a way where you want to be, how you would want them to treat you when they're adults, or how you would be proud of them, be proud of the adult that they turned into. You got to let go of those unrealistic expectations and let the children be children, because you can't expect a child to be so mature at a young age, and then when they're old and numb and they don't live life to the fullest and they have depression and you wonder why they lost their spark. Oh, as a kid, you used to be so mature for your age. You were so lively. You were so responsible. What happened to you? As an adult, you're a wreck. You don't have your life together. You have addictions. You have problems. It's because you didn't let the children be kids. And now it's like, how did this happen? Well, how do you think? Come on now. But like I said earlier, just developing healthy habits, developing healthy routines. You need an outlet, right? Because at the end of the day, no matter how much of a healthy life you try to live, whether it's eating your vegetables, whether it's working out, you need to find the outlet, because working out works for me, right? I can work out and that's my outlet for my emotions. But some people, it doesn't work for them that way. You need to be able to find an outlet. Some people, they use art as an outlet. They use music as an outlet. They use faith as an outlet. And or yoga, the gym, whatever works for you. Find what floats your boat and use that outlet, and stop using people as an outlet and trauma dumping and just letting all of that toxic and negative energy onto other people, because energy, it's a chain reaction, right? Science, it literally, you attract what you put out. Along with developing healthy habits, right? I'm not gonna tell you how to do that, because not everything works. Okay, what works for me is not gonna work for you, basically. Faith is a big part of how I live my life. And as Muslims, I know a lot of Muslims can relate to this, because if you know anything about Islam, the code of conduct in Islam is to be a good parent, right? I'm not covering the whole Quran right now, but being a good parent, being a good person, being a kind person to everybody you come across with is literally a good deed. You gain good deeds by doing that. That's the expectations of a good Muslim. And in order to be a good parent, you have to be able to recognize that as well, especially as Muslims. But, just find that outlet, find the healthy coping mechanisms, and stop reflecting and projecting all those emotions onto your children, onto your siblings. Like, you gotta find a way to let go of your hurt and grieve it and move on from it. I was watching a video earlier this week about this man. I really don't remember his name, and I couldn't link you the video, but I'm pretty sure if you look it up, you can find it on TikTok, Instagram, whatever. He talks about grounding and discharging, right? And I'm going to talk a little about what that is. Right, as humans, before the way we, what's the word I'm looking for? The way we evolved, right? We're constantly indoors. We're working indoors. We don't spend time outdoors as much as we should be. And the sun is vitamin C, vitamin D, one of those, right? It's literally vitamin for you. It's not just giving you cancer and burning your skin. Just like, let me relate it back to seasonal depression, right? Why do people go through seasonal depression when the weather is bad and it's gloomy and dark outside? Because that sun literally gives you that, I believe, the serotonin that you need. And as humans, we were meant we were built to spend about 85% of our lives outdoors, in nature, under the sun, in the grass, in the dirt. But the average human today, right? We spend not even 2% of our lifetime outdoors, not even. And I don't remember his name, but the dude in the video, he's talking about how the earth has a magnetic field, right? We all know this. We believe in science. I hope that we do. But the earth has this magnetic field, and we are a source of energy, just like how batteries in your phone, they need to get recharged once it's dead and it needs to recharge that battery. We are a source of energy, and we need to discharge and recharge that battery that we literally spend wasting on work, social interactions, our families, our pets, our daily routine, even brushing your teeth, doing the basic minimum chores, right? The bare minimum chores. We run out of energy and we need to recharge. And he talks about this earthing and grounding technique where you know how all the hippies would say, literally go step in some grass. Literally go walk out barefoot and put your feet in some dirt and discharge your body. It will shift your entire polarity, your alkalinity in your body. It does. And this is something that I had been neglecting, but I do remember at one summer where I really tried to wake up early, get in front of that sunrise and just do yoga and put my bare feet into the ground. I did this a couple times. I'm not gonna lie to you, I should have did it more. And I realized the effect that it had on me. And I don't know why I neglected it so much, but after watching that video, it reminded me of that I need to continue going and I need to continue doing that, because it allows you to just breathe and have a moment to yourself. All of our day, like every single day, we spend hours and hours dealing with something, whether it's cooking, whether it's work, whether it's school, whether it's whatever you got going on in your life, and you don't have a moment to yourself other than sleeping. And sleeping is, you need your sleep. And a lot of people, what do when they go to bed? They're on their phone scrolling, they're watching their shows, they're not going to bed, they're just filling up their brain with nonsense before they go to sleep. And your brain, you shouldn't be on your phone at least an hour before you go to bed, because you need your brain to be empty. Your brain does not just shut down right away after you put your phone down, right? It literally processes everything that you were just watching through your eyes, and even though you're asleep, right, you're not conscious, your brain stays awake, and when you wake up, you don't feel like you got a good night's rest, right? And sleeping, you got to give time to sleep, but you do need a minute to breathe, discharge, and ground yourself with the earth, because we came, like, we were meant to be outside. We were meant to live our lives and spend our times outside. Go do what you were meant to do and go be free. Hold on, y'all. It's getting a little dry. Now, we talked about the facts a little bit. I want to talk about my take, right? Because this is Yarrii's take. Let's talk about my experience with just mental health and generational trauma, I guess. I come from a Turkish background. I was born and raised in America, but I was very foreign to American social norms, social concepts, even the foods. I never had fast food up until I was like, I don't even know what age. I couldn't even tell you, like, for a very long time. I lived a very ethnically Turkish life, the most you could living in America. And my parents, they come from a whole different type of experience than I had growing up. In Turkey, they had cows and sheep outside, and they were in the fields, and they helped out with farming and gardening, and they lived their lives different than how me and my siblings did growing up. And then when they got married, newlyweds, right? My parents are 23 years old, right? 20 and 23 years old, I believe, came to America. They don't speak English. They're in a country where they have little to no family, right? I believe it was just my grandfather and his brother that were here at the time. They don't know who to turn to other than them two. And they're in a whole new country across the globe from where they came from. They don't speak the language. They don't know the social norms. They don't understand the money currency and how everything works, the economics. And they built a life here, and they raised us as kids. And I can't even begin to think or imagine the struggles that they may had to go through trying to raise us in this country that they're so foreign to. And they didn't have the luxury or the time to be depressed and sit down and sulk in their depression and mental health. The way that most Turkish people are raised, you gotta, like, it's a get-go, right? You don't have time to be sitting and sulking in your emotions. Suck it up, wipe your tears. You'll grieve later, you'll cry later when nobody's watching. Go get your money, go get your bread, go do what you need to do. And then if you have a time to breathe to yourself, that's when you can sulk and be sad. They didn't have the luxury to be depressed this generation today, right? We have the most time in our hands. And I feel as though people not having hobbies and different things that they're occupying their minds with, they have more time to sit and sulk in their own thoughts and their intrusive thoughts, which is why we fall victim to depression, and nobody wants to get up out of their bed and become productive and do something useful with their time, and they cope in that way. They didn't have that luxury. So they also didn't have the luxury of understanding what mental health was, right? My parents, they didn't finish their academic journey. They stopped at some point. They're not educated when it comes to mental health. And in Turkey, and I believe in most cultures, they believe mental health is a hoax. They don't believe it. They think it's fake. They think people make it up. They think it's in your head, right? But it's not. Like I said earlier, it's literally just like how you can get breast cancer because your grandmother had breast cancer and her grandmother had breast cancer. This is a biological thing that can be passed down. It's not something I'm making up or doing to get attention. A lot of parents, my parents didn't understand that growing up. I didn't understand what mental health was either. After a certain age, I had to do my own research on mental health. I went out of my way to get professional help, and I'm not ashamed about it. There's nothing wrong with that. Funny, like, it's not that I'm trying to call my parents out, but my dad, every time I would come back from the psychiatrist or therapist, she was a therapist, from a therapist, he would joke. He's like, how to go with your crazy doctor, right? Like, they didn't understand. And my dad, for example, he uses humor as a coping mechanism, right? He thinks if you laugh, you can't be sad. And they didn't understand why I was seeing a therapist. They were like, you have a good life. You have clothes on your back. You have a roof over your head. You don't have to worry about where your next meal is coming from. You're going to school. You're getting your education. You don't have to walk miles and miles to get to school in the rain, snow, harsh weather. What do you have to be depressed about? Do you not know that there are millions of children, millions of families suffering worse lives than you? I knew that. I knew every single thing that they were saying. It wasn't something I didn't know. It was something that I already felt guilty about, which is why it took me so long to get professional help, because I didn't think I had the right to be depressed. I didn't think I had the right to be sad, because look all around the world, right? People suffering from war crises, natural disasters, genocides. There are so many things happening around the world where we have the luxury to sit down and be depressed, and they don't. And that's what ate me up inside, of not being able to put my depression aside and keep those people in my mind saying, you have it better, you have it better. And I did not validate my own feelings, and I kept trying to suppress them and suppress them. At one point I grew numb. I started doing things that I wasn't proud of. I started becoming a version of me that I almost hated, right? I kind of did. And I had to unlearn a lot of things in order for me to deal with my mental health. And I'm not ashamed about it. I really do feel for the people who don't have the luxury to sit down and be sad. I really do. But I do need to prioritize my mental health in order to live the life that I need to be living, and make sure that my kids also live, or my siblings or people that I'm around, they don't, every time they experience a moment with me, I don't want people thinking of me as the numb girl, the negative, the girl who always has a bad attitude, the girl who don't know how to put a smile on her face. Like, I hated being that girl. Like, I wanted to leave a good mark on people. And that's also, a good deed in Islam. Always leave kindness, always spread kindness towards people. Make sure they remember you good. Make sure they remember you for something that you did good. And even though they don't understand today, right, I had to, in order for me to heal my relationship with my parents, I had to let go of the idea of trying to change them. Because at the end of the day, they're grown adults. I cannot change a grown woman, a grown man, and force an idea into them that they don't want to learn, or they're not willing, or they're just can't grasp, right? But what I can do is accept them for who they are, understand that they may not change, but I can change my attitude towards them. And instead of arguing with them, saying, you don't understand me, you don't get how I am, you never try to reason with me, you don't trust me, I saw them for who they were. I took that and I changed my attitude towards them. And that's when I realized our relationship started improving immediately and tremendously. And to this day, like, it still frustrates me, right? It still does, because we have our little moments where we can't come see eye to eye with things. But I've matured from it, and I've learned a lot in especially my teenage years. Oh, I know my parents, they went through a lot with me, right? Because I was very stubborn with trying to get them. I was trying to force them to have it my way. But I realized that having it my way is always not the best way. And I just accepted them for who they are, and understand that they never healed their inner child, and they were never taught how to do so. So I learned to love them the way they were, and I started healing my inner child, because I can't do that for you, right? I can only do that for myself, and nobody else can heal you for you. Nobody can do that job for you. That's something that you have to do for yourself, no matter how much you don't want to or how much you don't like it, right? And once I started doing that, my relationship with my parents, my relationship with my siblings, even my relationship with myself started healing, and I started seeing I did a whole 180, right? With my mental health and my, like, you can ask, well, don't ask, but a lot of my family members and friends can attest to this, where I've grown a lot from it. And I really want to reach out to people who can relate to this and help you grow in the same way, because it's no way to live holding on to all that hurt. It's going to drag you. It's going to upset you. It's going to put you more in that depressive state where you can't get out of. And depression does take lives, like it really does. And even if you're not suicidal, right, it literally shortens your lifespan, because I don't have the fact on this on hand, but I do remember reading that article about how, especially like, for example, with chemo patients, right? They say how mental health is a big criteria when it comes to that healing process, because they need a good emotional, mental support system in order to heal. And if they don't have that, the chances of chemo working is not as likely as not having that support system. Anyways, that's how my experience was. And I want to talk about the religious side a little bit, because that's also one thing I got growing up. I got a lot growing up. I struggled with holding on to my faith as a child. And my parents would say the reason why I'm depressed and the reason why I'm not happy or fulfilled with life is because I'm not praying enough, and that I don't love my religion enough, and that I need to be praying more, reading the Quran more, which they weren't wrong. I did need to be doing that more. But that's not always the case with depression, right? Just because I'm feeling low in faith doesn't mean my depression is caused by that. It may not. It could be stronger if I held on to my faith, because faith is what's the word I'm looking for? It's what makes a person, right? Their morals and beliefs are attached to their beliefs of faith, their religion, whatever religion you may be. Most of the religions have the same concept of sinning and not sinning. Like it's all just about being a good human being. And you have to acknowledge that faith in Allah always comes first. SubhanAllah, He is the most powerful. He's the one who heals. He's the one who sees everything. Faith in Him always comes first. But you also have to acknowledge the physical symptoms that depression is linked to with generational trauma, and all of that is out of your control. It's not your fault that your parents have unhealed issues and traumas that they didn't deal with, and it affected you growing up, because their traumas affect how they parent, and the way they parented you is also going to affect who you are as a person, and it's just a cycle that continues. That's out of your control, right? You have to be able to acknowledge and isolate that apart from your faith. Understand that faith is important, and you do need to have that faith in Allah, because if you don't have faith in Allah, how can you have faith in yourself? That's how that works. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says that you will be tested for your fears and your anxieties, and you need to be able to understand and navigate your feelings, and understand that your faith is an anchor in a way. And once you are able to do that, I promise you, you are unstoppable. It really is. And when it comes to especially the children who are born into Muslim families, right? A lot of Muslim families make this mistake. Some don't, and I give credit to the ones who don't. But a lot of the Muslim families force the religion upon to their kids. And I get it. You're trying to be a good Muslim. You're trying to make sure your kids don't grow up to be a kafir. But you have to put the love of the deen, the love of the faith, and the love of Allah in their heart. You have to make them love it. Just like how you can't force feed a child broccoli, you have to reverse psychology into them. You have to do that reverse psychology and trick them into it being delicious and tasting good and make them want to eat it, right? You have to make them love the religion and understand why it's so important to be a good Muslim. And after that, it follows. But kids who grew up in a family where Islam was forced upon them, they tend to rebel. Some don't, right? Some don't. But a lot of them tend to rebel. And because they feel like the religion was shoved down their throat, they don't, when they become adults, they don't want to live that lifestyle anymore. And that also makes you a bad parent, because whose fault is that? How did that start? And loving Islam, learning to love Islam is also learning to love yourself, because everything in the Quran, everything that Allah tells us on how to be and how to pray, everything, right? Everything that we are told to do that is obligated on us, even the 5 prayers a day, covering up head to toe, giving charity, all of those stuff, it's not, apart from making you a good person, it's the praying, right? As most Muslims know, it almost looks like yoga for the non-believers, right? And what do people do in yoga? They do to put their physical health first, right? It literally benefits your physical health, your mental health, and it's also an outlet for a lot of people. Just like I was talking about having the gym or art or crafts or whatever as an outlet, talking to Allah is also an outlet. Some people may not know how to talk to a therapist or a stranger about their problems, but you can always talk to Allah, right? Talking to Allah can be your outlet. And everything that we are obligated to do, it feeds your soul, it feeds your mental, it feeds your physical health. There is not one thing in the Quran that is obligated upon us as Muslims that is bad for you. Everything that's a sin is bad for you. Why don't we eat pork? Please go do a little bit of research. I'm not about to like bring you with the facts on that, but literally look up why pork is bad for your body and why almost every religion forbids you from eating it. Everything that's been a sin, it's either affecting your physical health, it's tainting your soul, your heart, or just tainting you as a person, right? Nothing in the Quran that is forbidden is good for you. And learning to love the Quran, learning to love Allah is learning to love yourself. I stand by it. And as parents, it's really crucial. It always starts at home. It always starts back to the parents. You need to be able to validate your children's feelings. You can't just dismiss them. But, like, I'm not saying don't remind them that, hold on, let me reword this. As parents, don't dismiss your children's feelings, right? Always validate their feelings. Remind them that Allah is the most strongest and He will always be there for you. Remind them to have good faith in Allah. But don't shame them and tell them that they're feeling this way because they're not close to Allah and they're not praying. They're probably already struggling with praying. And you shaming them is not encouraging them to go pray. Maybe, right, take a different approach. Listen to them, sit down with them, understand why they're feeling a certain way. Even if you can't understand why they're feeling that way, try to empathize and try to sympathize with their feelings and say, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. I don't know how to help you. Ask them. Maybe they need something specific. Everybody's emotional needs are different. How can I help you, right? And even if a lot of people don't know what they need in that moment, say, how about, let's do this, right? Let's get up. Let's go wash our face, let's go pray together. Let's go pray about it. And maybe go out, go grab a coffee, go do something different to make them feel better. Instead of forcing them or shaming them for not praying, why don't you encourage them to get up and pray with you? And say, let's talk to Allah about it. And then we'll go grab, I don't know, whatever your kid likes to drink, boba, coffee, I don't know what it is, pizza. Find something, and quality time is really important, right? Quality over quantities of time. And go encourage your children in a way where they're not feeling shamed by their parents for having those feelings. And I understand why you as a parent may feel as though they have no reason to be depressed. I understand. I went through that thought process myself. But you, as a parent, know very well that you've had similar feelings, but because you have other responsibilities, you never sat down and acknowledged your feelings. And because your kid it's almost like envy. They have the luxury to sit down and validate their feelings, but you didn't, right? And a lot of people don't realize that they have a lot of envy attached to their children because they're living the lives that they couldn't. You're trying to give, you love your kids, you want the best interest in them, but we're all human. Everybody has intrusive thoughts and some type of feelings in their heart where you would never say out loud, right? I understand that. And just be able to recognize that. And just like in the Quran, how Allah says, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا. With every hardship comes ease. You have to remind them that. These hardships are going to shape you as a person. It's not the end of the world. It's not. Still validate their feelings, but let them know that it's not the end of the world and they will overcome this, and they will overcome it even stronger and better if they have you as a support system. Touching back to what I said about not shaming your kids, right? I can't imagine anybody going to a patient going through chemotherapy for, I don't know, let's say breast cancer, right? For a breast cancer patient who's going through chemotherapy. I know, and you know, that you would never say, you're this sick because you don't pray enough. You are this ill because your faith in Allah is not strong enough. You would never say that to somebody, right? You would pray for them. You would say, may Allah grant you ease. May Allah grant you a healthy life, right? You would pray for them. Why don't you do that for your kids who suffer mental illnesses as well? Just because it's not physically apparent to you doesn't mean it's not an illness and it's not real. Anyways, I feel like I touched every point I wanted to, right? I feel like I made pretty good, valid points. I really would like to hear back from you guys, interact with me in the comments. Let me know how you feel about this. Let me know how I can go more in depth about it. If you want me to go more in depth and what points you want me to highlight more, because I would gladly do it. But with all that being said, the episode does have to come to an end. And I really hope that you took something away from this episode, whether you're a parent, a sister, a brother, anybody. I hope you took something away, and I really hope you apply it into your lifestyle, your routine. I really hope that even just one part of this conversation, I hope you took something from it. But don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Make sure you check out our podcast episodes on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And stay tuned for the next episode.